Okay. Okay. Hi, everybody. So if there are any other questions, you can feel free to ask them now. We're done with most of our agenda that we had set out, but there are some things that we forgot to cover in the previous session that we had actually planned. So I'll start with some of those things. And then if you have questions, you can ask them anytime in between. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. So we'll start with Jupyter again. I just want to show you how to save a plot because we didn't cover that yesterday. We just saw how to plot it in the Jupyter browser window. So let's start a Jupyter notebook. It's taking its own. Yeah. Okay, so we should still have the notebook we saved yesterday. Yeah. Import matplotlib is also here. Okay. So as soon as you open a notebook, if you want to run each cell, you can also just give cell run cells. It'll run run all. Then that'll just run all the cells. But then you have to be careful because if some cells have a lot of code, then it can take a while to finish running. But anyway, this one was whatever we had here was not really heavy at all, so it finished quickly. Now, if you want to save a figure, there is just a simple command. It's called plt.savefig. So if you have imported matplotlib as matplotlib.pyplot as plt, so make sure that you have written this .pyplot after matplotlib. This plt itself can be anything else too, whatever you want, but it should just not be a keyword that Python already associates with something else. Okay, so plt.savefig is the function to save a figure. It will just save whatever figure has been currently generated, and the first argument is just the file name that you want to save it in. So let's just call it test plot.png, and we can copy this and put it just after our plot here, and hit enter, shift enter, sorry. And then we can just go back and check if it has created, yeah, it has created this plot. So you can also open the plot and it will open up in your browser and you can see it. Let me close that. So I hope people have this notebook from yesterday and you're able to plot something and save it, but otherwise we can wait if you want to try something simple. So for example, you can just try maybe this import matplotlib line and then just plt.plot or stem, whatever, and then just give one array. And you can even skip the X label, Y label and things for now and just try plt.savefig and give a file name that should save the plot. Okay. What next? So if you're submitting the notebook itself as maybe your submission for a programming assignment, then you can just so remember I mentioned the save and checkpoint yesterday. So you can just save and checkpoint. It will save it as testnotebook.ipnb. That's the extension for a Python notebook, and you can just submit that notebook, and whoever has Jupyter installed should be able to open that notebook on their browser and look at your code as well as the outputs that have been generated. Okay, and in case you want to add some headings, so if you're using this to submit an assignment, some kind of a report, then it's nice to have some subheadings. For example, the assignment may have certain sub questions or different questions, different parts. So by default, every cell is a code cell, which means that whatever you write in it gets interpreted as some kind of Python code. But you can also, so to insert a new cell, you can just click on this plus mark. It'll insert a cell below whichever cell was selected. You can go to this drop down menu that says code, and you can change it to, let's say, change it to heading. Okay, sure, never mind. So just save it to change it to Markdown from code. And Markdown is another form of writing for the web generally, which is a much simpler version of HTML. So it has much simpler syntax and it's easier to write. So if you want to write a heading, then you put this hash symbol. That means it's a big heading. So let's say section 1, and you press Shift Enter, then it just appears in this form. So it'll now seem like whatever that marks the beginning of this new section. You can also edit it by just double clicking on that cell again. If you put a couple of more hashes, then the size goes on reducing. So it becomes more of a subheading. If you do not put any hash symbol, it will just print it as text. So you can also write, if you want to make some observations on some figure you've generated, then you can have this plot and then add a cell and then write some text. This plot, this is a stem plot. You can type this, but remember to change the cell type to Markdown and then Shift Enter. Because if you don't change it to Markdown, and it'll try to run this is a stem plot statement as though it is a Python command. Okay, that's some additional things about the notebook. So so I think we can close the notebook now and go back to writing all of this in a script. Yeah, that reminds me, you can also download a Python notebook in various formats. So there's an HTML format in which you will see the code and the outputs that you've generated, all of them appearing. None of that will be editable, of course. It will just be sort of read only, but it will be an HTML file. And you can also save it as a .py file. So what it will do is you can what happened? Let's save and checkpoint. Download as, oh, that's here. Okay, for some reason that's not working on this PC. But anyway, okay, let's quickly go back to our script and just do a little more of the plotting. So you can copy these plot commands and put them in a script. You can also just close and halt this notebook. And so whenever you want to see if you've left any, if you've accidentally closed some tabs where some notebooks were running, you can click on running to see if there are any notebooks running. And when you're done with the session, you can click on quit. That will close the Jupyter session. Okay. So let's open up a script. Maybe, yeah, this test script is fine. Okay. So let's import matplotlib.pyplot.splt and just plot these things. So plt.savefig will also work here, but if you want to show a figure then you have to add this additional command here. But in Jupyter, you didn't have to do that. But when you're running a script, if you want to also have the figure appear in a separate window, then you need to add this plt.show. And we'll comment out the save fig for now. And let's try running this. So this is saved in desktop. So in our command prompt, we have to change to the desktop and then run the script test script.py. And yes, so that will bring up the plot in a new window. You can also save the plot from here. But before that, you can also make some adjustments. So for example, if you want to zoom into a portion and only save that, then you can click on this magnifying glass symbol and then just drag and drop. If you want to go back to the previous view or the original view that the plot started up in, then you can just click on this home button. It'll take you back to how it was. You can't edit the title or the X or Y labels. Some versions of Matplotlib, I think, allow you to do that also, but in general, you might not be able to do that. But that's okay. You can always control that from your script, and you can also adjust the size. One way to adjust the size, of course, is to just resize the window itself. That will also reflect in the saved output. But you can also say you have multiple subplots, then you can also click on this slider icon here, and you can adjust the spacing to the left or in the bottom. So you can adjust it to look the way you want it to look. And when you're satisfied, you can click on the save figure symbol. And it's just like saving any other file. You would just give the file name and then choose the path where you want to save it and just click save. But the nice thing here is you can, there are a number of font file types available. And generally, if you're writing something in maybe LaTeX or maybe on Overleaf, then the PNG format, the image format can look a little blurry sometimes. So it might be a good idea to save it as a PDF or EPS. And then upload it to your Overleaf or LaTeX document, because LaTeX can also interpret PDF and render the image within it. PDF or EPS, either is okay. JPG is generally not a good idea because it tends to compress the image, and so on zooming in to the document, you might lose out on the resolution. So PDF or EPS, those are also good options. Okay. And so to the X label, Y label, title, etc., there are a bunch of additional arguments that you can add. For example, font size, make it 14, font size, say 10, and so on. And that will simply change the size of the font. There are also some other additional parameters like what font you want, etc. And you can find all of those if you look up the documentation for Matplotlib, PyPlot, X label or Y label, and so on. Okay, so that's about the plotting part. And yeah, okay. So let's, there was something, okay, what else did I want to talk about? Yeah, so now the way we are importing these additional packages, we saw how to write a function in the previous class. So you can also write functions and save them in a separate file and import that file also and use the function that you've written there. So for example, let's go back to this generate Fibonacci sequence.py. Hopefully all of you also have it. We wrote this function called gen underscore fib underscore seq. I can give a moment for all of you to open it if you want to. Let's remove this line. Yeah, we should probably have something similar, a function doing the Fibonacci sequence calculation, line taking in the user input for the number of elements required, and the align with the initialization of the sequence and then calling the function itself. So it's, and then of course the print statement. But you should have all of this. Now let's cut the function from here and open a new script and save it here. Paste it here, and so when you do this, you have to check to see if you're using any imported modules in this function block. So for example, if you were using NumPy or SciPy or something else, then those have to also be imported here. But right now it doesn't look like we're using any packages. So you can just go ahead and save this as, so I'll save it in the desktop, but let's save it as fib sequence function.py. Again, this also has to be in a .py file extension. You can give it whatever name you want. It does not have to be the name of the function that's within the file itself. The name can be anything. And let's save that. Okay. So I hope all of you were able to do that. Next, we go back to our main file, which is the generate Fibonacci sequence, and we'll say import fib_seq function. So this fib_seq function is just referring to the file that we just wrote, .py. You do not have to write .py when you write import. When you write import some other script, you do not have to add the .py. You just have to add this much. But now, if you just say import, you can also say import it as something, because this is a really long name. Just like we did with matplotlib, we called it PLT. For NumPy, we called it NP. Let's just call it fib func, maybe. Okay. So now what happens is we had this function call to the genfib sequence, which is not in this file anymore. It's in a different file. So if you just say genfib sequence, Python will try to look for the function within this file itself. So it won't find it and it will throw an error. But because it's inside this other file that we have just imported as fib func, we will say fib_func dot genfib sequence. So it's just like saying plt dot plot. If you just said plot, Python wouldn't understand where to look for the plot. So you add plt dot plot to tell it that look for plot in the matplotlib pyplot module. So in the same way, we are saying look for this function gen fib_seq in this module called fib_func, which is actually this other module that we've written in a separate script. Okay. So the advantage of doing this is, say you have several functions written for many other purposes also. You can have all those written in a separate file, and you can have all of these functions written one below the other. So for example, we could just have a copy and call it something else, maybe seq1. So you can just have all of these functions defined one below the other in a separate file. And then yeah, and then you can just import that other module and give it some alias. And then whenever you want to call a function from that module, you just have to add this alias dot function name, and that should work. So let's try. Hope all of this was clear so far. And let's run generate fib_seq.py. Oh, okay. I need to specify the number as a command line argument. Let's do that. Let's say 10, and it still works. Okay. So the main idea of having functions in a separate file is to keep your main file neat and tidy, because if you had a lot of function definitions before you actually got to the main part of the code, then it might be harder for somebody else who's trying to understand your code, or maybe even for yourself when you revisit it a few months later to understand what's happening. So it just makes it tidier. It makes it easier to understand when you have functions in a separate file and you just import them and use those functions with the alias. So that also comes under some good coding practices. And another practice is to generally add some kind of single line comments in places in your document. For example, we have this genfib_seq function, and whenever you write a function, the convention is to just add a couple of lines of comment before you even start writing anything within the function, where the comment gives a description of what the function is for. So returns a sequence, or maybe you can say function to generate a sequence of Fibonacci numbers. That's it. So it'll even just help you when you're trying to understand what this does. And that's not all. You can also write input and returns. You can say what it takes as the input arguments, what it returns as the output. So if you just add these 3 lines of code to, these 3 lines of code to every function you write, it'll just make life a lot easier for you when you're trying to revisit it sometime later. Okay, I think there was a question in the chat. Argv of 1, what 1 means here. Okay, so we dealt with this in the last class, but I'll also quickly explain it again. So the sys.argv basically captures everything that you write after Python in your terminal. So generate fib_seq.py, that's the name of the script that is present in sys.argv of 0. So sys.argv is basically a list which stores whatever you write after this Python. So the 0th entry is the name of the script itself. The first entry is whatever parameters you pass after that. So if I had, if my file needed say 2 or 3 parameters, then I would write, I would just go on writing those other arguments separated by spaces, and those would get captured in 2 and 3. So argv of 2, second index would be 20, third index would be 30, and so on. So argv is just a list that captures whatever you write after, after the Python command in your terminal. And why is it useful? It's useful when you want to pass certain, when you want to allow the user to pass certain argument to your function without having to hard code it inside your script itself. Okay, yes, so that's about writing some comment here. That's a general comment at the top level, but you can also have some additional comments, single lines of comments saying get new entry and then append to list and so on. So you don't have to have this for every line, then it'll just become messy again. But maybe in parts that seem like they need an explanation, you can just add this one line of command, a commented line, where you started with this hash symbol. So Python knows that this is a comment, and then you just type some useful information about what's happening just below the commented line. Okay, yes, now let's also talk about file IO operations that I think we left, we forgot to cover that in the previous session. So let's quickly look at how to read and write files. We looked at one example of reading and writing files using NumPy, that's NumPy load text and NumPy save text. But Python also has inbuilt features to read and write a file. which is pretty similar to C actually. So let's say we want to write this sequence of Fibonacci numbers, not to the console, but to a file. So we first have to open the file. Let's just call it FID, FID fib, open of the file name. Okay, let's call it fib seq.txt, and what mode you want to open it in. So right now we want to write something to the file, so we'll open it in W mode, which is the write mode. So this open command is a built-in function in Python. Python knows what you mean when you say open. It'll open this file and it'll pass a file handle or a file pointer to this variable FID_FIB. Now, if you want to write something to this file, it's as simple as saying FID_FIB dot write. So this dot write does the writing operation, and inside this write, it always has to be a string, some kind of character, because a dot text file always saves data in a character format or a string format. So okay, let's first write a line saying list of first, how many? Okay, so here, like I mentioned in the first session, there's a concept of something called a format specifier, where in the middle of a string, you can just say %d and continue typing. And this, you can refer to this %d later in the form of some variable. So that variable will get printed in place of this %d. So right now I want to say in place of %d, 10 or 20 or whatever that the user has passed when they call the script. But I don't already know it beforehand, so I can't write the value here. One way is to not have this %d and just write plus str of, str of and fib, and then write another plus and go on typing whatever else you want. That's one way. So you write, so we saw how adding strings just concatenates them. So it makes it into a giant string when you add these three. Fibonacci numbers. But another neat way to also do it is to not have, I'll just leave this line commented here in case you want to do it that way. Another way to do it is just to write %d or %f, whatever you want there. But because we're talking about an integer, %d is sufficient. So we say list of first n Fibonacci numbers, and maybe you put a colon and a new line so that all the numbers get printed in the next line. /n stands for a new line. Okay, and after this, we have to put that percentage and put the name of the variable that we want this to be replaced with, %d to be replaced with. So this will just print this statement to the file. Okay, that's done. Now we also want to print all the numbers in our Fibonacci sequence list. So let's start a for loop for item in FIB seq updated. So we saw how you can just retrieve the elements in a list using this item for item in Fibonacci sequence or in some list syntax. So in every iteration, it will just go on giving you the items of this list sequentially. So now what we want to do is FID_FIB dot write again, and we say str of item. Now, if you want to also add a new line, if you want to print it in a new line, then we can also add a new line separately here. Let's say FID_FIB write a new line. Or if you want to maybe separate it with commas, then we can just say comma and space. So after every item, it'll add a comma and a space. Okay, once that's done, so this will hopefully print all the values in our list to the file. And then we have to close, we have to remember to close the file that we have opened. So it's as simple as just saying the file pointer dot close and open and close round brackets. Okay. So yeah, again, I don't have to mention again that whatever you want to lie within the for loop has to be indented, and whatever is not indented will not be part of the for loop. So this close statement should not be indented. It should be at the same level as the for, so that it does not get interpreted as lying within the for loop. Okay, let's save this. Yes, okay, let's go to our terminal and run the script, generate fib seq.py. I keep forgetting every time. We have to pass an argument. It's 10. So it hasn't thrown any errors. It probably worked. Let's see if we can find that file and open it. File, open, desktop. What name did we give it? fibseq.txt. It's here. We open it, and yes, so it's written this line and then added a new line after this colon and then put a comma and a space. But it's, you can see it's also put one after the last element. You can just have an if statement to check if it's the last element, and then so you can have some if statement within the for loop to check if you've reached the last element. If you have, then do not print the comma, something like that. So that shouldn't be very hard. So one way to check if you've reached the last element is we looked at how to use the enumerate function in the previous sessions. So you could have for I item, I comma item in enumerate of fibseq updated. This will also go on giving you the index values of the list in I and the values at those indices in item. So you can just say if I not equal to, sorry. Oh, I think I forgot to mention what the syntax for not equal to is. For equal to, it's, I mean, if you want to compare, it's just equal to. If you want to say not equal to, it's this exclamation and equal to sign. So if I not equal to, so remember, the indices start from 0 and go all the way till len -1. So if we have reached the last element, I should be equal to the len -1. So if it's not equal to this, only then print the comma and space. So this has to be indented. Remember to put this colon at the end of the if statement, and remember to indent this fib.write by 2 more spaces. The 2 spaces is just a convention. You can have 4 spaces or a tab space, anything that you want, but just try to make it consistent. Okay, so now what will happen is if I has reached the last element, then this will not get printed. Let's save this and run our script. Okay, no errors. I'm going to quickly switch to the text file. It says it has been modified. You want to reload it? Yes. And yeah, the comma and space at the end are gone. So that's just something if you want to make the text file look nice. Okay, let's quickly go to how to read data from a file. It's very similar. So you can just copy this line that we had for open and replace the W with an R. So W stands for writing to a file. R stands for the reading mode. Sorry. So we open this file in a read mode. Oh, but we have to make sure that we have closed it before we open it again. Yes. So we have written to this file and closed it. So now we can safely open it again. And okay, so reading from a file is not as easy as just calling, say, numpy.loadText, because numpy.loadText tries to format it and tries to parse what's in the text file and gives it into a numpy array directly. But when you use this way of opening a file, then it will just give you a string, and you have to go in and split it wherever you want and try to interpret it. So to read, this has right now just opened the file pointer. It hasn't yet read any data. So to read what's in the text file, we'll say FIB data is this file pointer dot read. So this will just give us whatever is in the file in the form of one giant string. Let's maybe comment this print statement, and let's print this FID underscore data to see what it has given us. And let's also remember to close the file that we have just opened. Okay, so hopefully you've all been able to write these 4 lines of code now. So if at any point of time it feels like I'm going too fast, please feel free to stop me or ask me to slow down. Okay, now what we're doing is we're just opening this file, reading it, and printing what we have read. Okay, let's run the script again. Oh, I haven't saved it. I forgot to save the file. So let's run it again. FID data is, oh, sorry, it's FIB data. Just close that, and yes, so this is FIB data. Sorry for all the confusion, but FIB data, yes, that looks fine. Let's run it. Yes, so it's just printed whatever's in the file as it is. And you can see it's just one giant string. If you want to check that it's indeed a big string, then you can, let's say, let's print another few things. Let's say we print type of FIB data, print len of FIB data. Let's add these 2 and save it and run it again. So it says that it's a string and it's of length 76. So why 76 is simply because each character here, including these alphabets and spaces and new line and these digits, everything has just got interpreted as one character, and therefore each one is one element. So this is actually a string right now, and you can index the elements of the string. So for example, if you wrote print FIB data of say 10 to 20, we can comment these 2 lines now, save it, and yes, so it's just indexed this data from 0 here, and then it's counted all the way till 10, and it is just printed 10 to 20. So you can see it's not a very friendly way for us. If you wanted to just extract this array of numbers, then it doesn't directly let us do that. You have to know how to do it by yourself. You'll have to do it manually. But there are some tricks you can use. For example, okay, we can also, let's change this back to FIB data. There's another function called read lines. What that does is it reads separate lines in the file that you have opened into separate rows or separate elements of the list. So let's try doing this again. And so make sure you've got this command right. Read lines, open and close round brackets. Let's again just print FIB data, its type and its length. Save this and let's go back and run it. Okay, so now it's a list and not a string anymore. It was a string earlier. Now it's a list and it's only got 2 elements. That's because it has, because if you remember, we had 2 lines of text in our text file that we wrote. The first line was this list of first 10 Fibonacci numbers along with the /n, and then the next line was all of the numbers themselves. So now this already makes life a little easier. So if you only wanted to look at the numbers, you could look at only the element at position 1 in this list, and then somehow try to get the numbers out individually. So let's see how to do that. So right now we've got the numbers in our at the element at the index 1. So but the data type of each of these elements is string. So each of these list of Fibonacci numbers and the sequence of numbers, each of those is just one giant string. So if you remember from the first session, a string comes with certain methods that we can call on it. And one useful one is the dot split. I think we looked at dot replace and dot capitalize. Dot split is another useful function. What it does is you can specify some parameter here. So what it'll do is it'll split the string. Whenever it sees a comma, it'll split the string at those points and put all of the individual elements into separate elements in a separate list. Okay, so let's call it fib sequence red, and so we are indexing fib data of 1 because that's the entry containing all the numbers, and then we're doing dot split and splitting it at every comma. So this FIB-ACQ red should be a list in which each position, each index contains a separate number. But note that each of these separate numbers will also still be a string. Okay, so let's print, instead of FIB data, let's print FIB-ACQ READ, FIB-ACQ READ, and also length of FIB-ACQ READ. Okay, we've just changed the print to FIB-ACQ READ, which is just the data in the first position split at all the commas. Okay, let's go and run that. So again, it's a list and each element is a string, but you can also see that some of these have spaces just before the number. So we can also add a space after this comma if we also want to remove the space out. And you can see that the length is 12. That's how many numbers we had written. So now we can add a space after this comma and run it again. And those spaces should now be removed. Yes. So right now we only have the digits, but in a string format, which we can easily convert to integers. So one way to do it is to just start a for loop. So for I in range FIB SEQ underscore RED, range of len of, sorry. So for I in the range of len of this array, so we, if you remember, we mentioned that by default, if you only specify one parameter to range, it'll assume that the starting point is 0, the ending point is what you've mentioned here, -1, and the step size is 1. So it'll increment the count in steps of 1. Okay, so I is in this range. What we want to do is replace every element with an int of FIB-ACQ READ of I. So we're just taking what's already there, we're changing it to an int type and putting it back in the same location. Okay, hopefully you've all got that. I can pause a moment, pause for a moment if you want to write that down. Okay, so let's run it. Now it's again a list, but you can see all the inverted commas have disappeared. So right now it's a list of type int. I mean, the individual elements are of type int. And now we've got back our Fibonacci sequence that we originally wrote to the file. Okay, so just like read and write, another operation is append, which is A, for which you have to write A. What that does, that is also a writing mode, but if you open a file in the W mode, and if the file already exists, then whatever was already present in the file will get overwritten. It'll become completely blank, and you'll end up writing afresh. But if you say read mode is A, then whatever is already in the file is preserved, and whatever you write in this script will only get appended below what's already there. So that's, but it's just a matter of changing this mode. All the other operations remain the same, similar to the write operation. Okay, that's about file IO. There's one last thing that I think we want to cover. That's the debugging. So if you're using some really advanced text editors, then the debugging operation might already be built in. For example, Spyder has this option where you can set breakpoints at certain lines, and then the execution will stop when it comes there. But if you don't, then there is a package called PDB, which comes with Python by default. So let's just add an import statement at the top. If there are any questions till this point, please feel free to ask. If you want me to repeat some part, or if something is not clear, you can please ask now. Okay, so hopefully you've written this import PDB. Now let's say we want to set a breakpoint somewhere in this code. Maybe, okay, so after we've finished writing all the files, all the numbers in our sequence to this file, that's the open and write, and yes, so we've finished writing and we've closed the file. Let's put a breakpoint here. So the syntax to put a breakpoint is pdb.set trace. PDB is just the name of the module that we imported, and set trace is a function in this module. So we're just calling that set trace from PDB. So it's pdb.set_trace, open and close, round brackets. And that's it. So when you run this file, the execution will halt at this point, and you will be able to go step by step within your terminal itself. Okay, so I hope you've written this down. Let's go to our terminal, run the script. So it pauses here. So you can see that, so it prints here the first line that appears after your line, which says set trace. So the first line that appears after this is this open file open command. So you can see that that's displayed here. It hasn't yet run this line. So whatever line appears here is what is ready to run. And if you type N and hit enter, it will just execute that one line and go to the next step. So the next step is FIB data, FID fib read lines. So that's so the line that's displayed here is what the program is ready to run. If you hit N, it reads, it executes that line. Now this can be useful if, for example, you want to inspect some variable. So maybe you're having some trouble with your code and you don't know what exactly is going wrong. And maybe you want to inspect some variable somewhere in between. So for example, when we read the file from this text file, earlier we didn't know in what format it had read. So we ended up printing all these statements like print the variable, print its type, print its length, and so on. But if we had put a breakpoint instead, we could have just done all of this interactively in one go. We could have just asked for, so this debugging mode is also a Python session. So you can run whatever commands you want here. For example, simple things like 2+3 or adding variables. You can do all of that again here. You can also print whatever variables are already present here. You can print their len and type. And so we could have done all of this here in the debugging session, and we would have known what to do in one shot. Instead of having to print all of this several times and try all of that out, it might have been simpler to just do it in one debugging session. Sorry. So the N command lets you go step by step. If you type C and hit enter, it'll just continue and finish running the rest of the program, and it will not stop unless there is another breakpoint somewhere else. So you can have any number of such pdb.setTrace commands anywhere in your program. So wherever it appears, the program will stop executing at that point. So let's type C and hit enter, and it just finished running the whole program. Okay. Another feature of debugging that some of you might be familiar with if you've used MATLAB is the feature of stepping into a function, or not, as opposed to stepping over something. So the stepping over is equivalent to this n, which just goes to the next line. But if, say, you wanted to step into some function, let's remove that set trace from where it was, and let's put it just before we call our function. So we've written this function, generate Fibonacci sequence. It's in the other file, and we're calling that function here. So let's try to go inside this function and look at and execute commands line by line within that function. So we put the set trace just before the function is called, save it, and run it. Okay, so now it's halted and it's showing the line that it's ready to execute. So to go inside this function, do not press N, but press S and hit enter. So it's gone to this line which says define genfib seq, and you can see that the path has changed to the file where it's actually present. So once you're within this function, then you can just start typing N and go line by line. So if you end up hitting a for loop, then you'll stay stuck within that for loop for as long as the for loop is running. So every time you keep pressing N, it'll just keep going to the next iterations, and it'll only come out of the for loop when it's done. But you can also just press C here and it'll just finish running the whole program from wherever you've left it. So it can be, this is a useful feature when, suppose you don't know where this function is. Maybe you haven't written the function, maybe somebody else has written the function, or maybe it's a inbuilt function of Python that you're calling from some module, from some other module, but you want to know what it's doing internally. So you can just put this set trace before the function is called, and then do S to get into the function and go on running lines within that function. And you can, at any point of time, you can just print some variable if you want to see what it is like, print its type, its length, etc. So it's a good way to explore some files or functions that you do not understand. So that way it's very convenient. Okay, that's about the debugging. Is there anything else? Parth, is there something else that we have left out for this session?
You can just introduce Colab.
Okay, Colab. All right, so if there are any questions up to this point, please feel free to ask. This is mostly what we wanted to cover on this side of writing Python scripts, doing different things with it, and how to run, how to debug, etc. If there are any questions, you can go ahead and ask. Otherwise, we'll just look at Google Colab. So just type Google Colab and just go to the first link. So Google Colab is just like the Jupyter Notebook that you ran on your PCs, but this is just running on Google server. So you do not need to have anything installed on your own PC. You just need to have a Google account. And so because I already have some other notebooks that I've already worked with, it's just asking me if I want to open any of these. But if you haven't got this window open, you should have this, whatever is in the background here open. You can click on File and New Notebook there. Or if this has opened up, you can click on New Notebook. And it will just start a notebook that's very similar to a Jupyter Notebook. Yes. So you can see it's got this cell. The formatting is slightly different. The visuals are slightly different, but the principles are similar. It's also got the same .ipnb extension. So it's basically just the Jupyter Notebook. And you can import NumPy, SNP. Even here, to execute a cell, you can either click on this play button or hold shift and press enter. And yeah, sometimes it can take a while to even run simple things like this. If it's the first time you're running, then importing modules can take some time, because it's trying to fetch those and initialize the service for your use and so on. But apart from that, you can do all the other stuff that you can do in Jupyter or in Python right here. If you want to add a code cell, you can just click on this plus. If you want to add a text cell, so we saw how we could add those cells and change them to the markdown format if you wanted to add headings. So Google Colab just makes it a little simpler. You can just have some text. You can even format it, type whatever you want, and then just hit enter. That will just appear as text. If you want to change the font, or so you can see that it's using a similar syntax of plus the hash symbols. And yes, so it's just got a little bit of better visuals and better formatting, but the underlying things are the same. Now, let's say you want to install some new package. By default, a Google Colab has most of these popular packages like NumPy, Matplotlib pre-installed, so you do not have to install these separately. You might be wondering how I managed to run this and it worked. Is it because I already have it installed on my system? No, it's not got anything to do with what I have on my system, but Google has just installed these already on their server. So these are all always available. But say there is some package that's not available in Google Colab, you can install it using the same pip command, but you have to add this exclamation mark at the beginning and then type pip install, and whatever package name that you want to type, you can just install that, and that will install it. But the problem is it will only be installed in this local session that you're running now. If you want, so if you close this, this might not be, okay, yeah, so the changes are being saved. You can change the name, and that will get, all of this will get saved to your Google Drive account. So you can just change the name and test workshop IPNB, and that will just save it. And okay, what else? Yeah, so most other things like Matplotlib are also already present. You can even see it gives some help. Yeah, so that's about it. But one problem with this is by default, if you just if you want to read some data that's on your computer, or you want to save something from here, then it can't directly access your computer. It only has access to your Google Drive. So if you want to work on some specific data set that you got from somewhere else, say some files or CSV files or anything like that, then you have to upload that to your Google Drive account and then attach your Google Drive account to this Colab notebook. I'm not sure if, yeah, I've actually slightly forgotten how to do that, but you can look that up and find out how to link your Google Drive account with Google Colab so that you can read files from your drive. So that's one caveat with using Google Colab. You can run things and it's nice that way, but if you want to work on some data that you already have on your system, you have to take the time to upload it to your drive and then link the drive and so on. It's not a difficult procedure, it's just not as simple as working with Python on your own system. Okay, that's about Google Colab. Anything else you want to add, Parth?
No, that's enough.
Yeah, anything else that have we left out? Anything from the plan that we had made? Anything that we were supposed to cover? So we left out a couple. Okay, there's a question. Okay, due to space issues on a particular drive in my system, I want to remove Jupyter, which I installed yesterday. Unable to uninstall. You can, if you installed it with pip, then you can just do pip uninstall Jupyter and it removes it. I can just show. So what did you use to remove Jupyter? Did you run pip uninstall? So for example, I can do this, and it's taking a moment, but yeah, that should uninstall. Yeah, it's asking me if I want to remove. It's asking for a confirmation. I press yes, and yeah, it's taking a moment, but that should. Yeah, so it's successfully installed and uninstalled. If I try to run Jupyter Notebook now, it shouldn't. Oh, okay. Maybe I also have to uninstall Notebook separately. Pip uninstall Notebook. Okay. Hmm. Yes. So I guess you also have to uninstall this Notebook separately if you want to completely remove. Pip3 uninstall Jupyter doesn't work. How about just pip? Are you sure you have to use pip3 on your system? But it does not work. What do you mean? What error does it give? You can maybe even unmute yourself and talk about it. That might make it easier. Yeah, okay. So you also did pip uninstall Notebook, and it's okay now? Is that what you mean? Okay, cool. Okay. Yeah, somehow I don't remember doing this on Ubuntu, but I guess I've never really tried to uninstall these packages. It's like once you uninstall, you just keep using them. But yeah, that was a good point. Thank you. You might have to do pip uninstall Notebook as well as pip uninstall Jupyter for some reason. Yes. So anything else? Any other questions? Anybody? Animation using pip. Okay. I'm not sure what animation is. Is that a separate package? What's pip? Animation. Okay. Tools for terminal-based wait animations. Okay. Do they have pip install animation? Okay. Isn't working in the matplotlib. Parth, are you aware of this animation package? Those decorators for doing terminal-based animations. There is a function that requires.
No, I don't aware of this.
Okay, they've just given an example here. But what do you mean it's not? So it looks like it's just a way to add decorators to your terminal. So for example, they have added this wait command and it just prints that it's waiting to the terminal. So I'm not sure what you mean by it's not working in matplotlib.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, I have a program in which animation is being used. So the program is running, but the animation is not working. Like the plot is not moving as it should be. And I have tried installing the pip install animation, but it's still not doing anything. It's okay if you
So
don't know. I'll try to figure out.
yeah, but it doesn't look like.
Hey, could
So
you
do you?
import it? Like,
Yeah, sorry, go on.
okay.
You were saying, Parth?
If she can import it, then there is no problem with installation.
Yeah, if you're able to import it without any errors, which means that means it has installed it. But from the documentation, it doesn't look like animation is for matplotlib, but maybe you know more about it. So is your objective to make the plot interactive or plot several images one after the other and to sort of make it look like it's moving or something like that?
Yes.
Okay, so you might want to take a look at ION matplotlib. Yeah, so it's something called the interactive mode. So what that does is it sort of keeps the figure. I think it's like the hold on feature in MATLAB. So it keeps the figure alive, and then it goes on updating with whatever extra you go on adding. So maybe you can read a little bit more about this. I don't know if that can help, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, so if nothing else, I guess we are done. Thank you everybody for participating in the workshop. I hope it was useful, and I hope you've been able to run at least some of these things. And of course, we might not have been able to teach you all that you wanted, but maybe it's given you at least a flavor of what you can do with Python, and maybe you'll be able to use it in your projects or for your work, etc. Parth, anything else you want to say?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing. Thank